ahead, Jimmy.
Hi everyone, my name is Jerry. I just have a question for the first group on mental health. I was blown away and I saw everyone else was blown away. The idea you had, I thought were absolutely amazing that you came up with. It's the first time I saw that paper. I'm just wondering, what's the first step for you when you're launching the papers? Who you target to try and do that?
Okay, so a big discussion that we had with this is that you can't just...
Oh, so the question Jimmy asked was, the mental health group had a really, really great idea. He just wants to know how they're going to implement their idea, what organisation they're going to target first.
Yep. So the big discussion that we had is that we learned from the discussion was that we can't just start trying to implement this on a nationwide scale just yet. It's just going to fall to pieces. We'd rather build up by strengths. And the idea was that hair scheme that I'm on, built up by 3 people started that 15 years ago. Had 5 years of kind of like a test run, and when they showed how useful it was, it absolutely exploded nationwide. And it's in such a strong position now, and the idea is the same for HEAD, is that if we approach one institution with a kind of altered version of what we're doing, tailored for this institution, that we can grow up from there, establish ourselves, but we need to prove that it works. And then when we can prove that it works, the idea is that it's going to speak for itself. So that's the idea behind it. But it should be nationwide, and it's very important that it's in Northern Ireland as well, because there's nothing even like here in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, thank you for your very kind comments, Jamie. Appreciate them. So, just a little bit more background. Because there is not an access scheme in Northern Ireland at the moment, that is where the particular problem area is. There really is just nothing for students coming in. So our idea is to use a prototype institution in the north and the south and run it for 1 year. And if that is successful and if it's run coordinated by our proposals, which we think will work, and is successful, then we believe that that will then be a sort of point of departure for a more nationwide approach to vision.
Stephen, you've got a question?
Yeah, first of all, really great presentation, so thanks very much. When I was running my dissertation last year, I started off over here and ended up completely with something different on the other side of the spectrum. And just wondering, like procedurally, did you have a similar experience? Did you start with one idea and end up with something different, or did you follow it through from when we elected these back in UCT, or how did you find that? So that's maybe like a brief on from each group.
So the question from Stephen was, when he was doing his dissertation, he started off here and ended up over here. Did you guys have the same experience? Did you start off with one idea and end up with something completely different? Can I target this also to Rachel's group, because I know I was in that group and that's exactly what happened to us. And how did you guys overcome that?
Yeah, so initially in Dublin at orientation, when we were trying to decide our topics, I was very passionate about trying to change or try and advocate some north-south institutional cooperation, particularly in third level education, because I experienced personally a lot of trouble trying to apply to colleges in the south, and I know people from the south couldn't apply to the north, and I thought this was flawed. I thought there should be a proper conversion between A-levels and Leaving Cert, which doesn't really exist. And other people were passionate about healthcare, people living in borders that can't go to hospitals closest to them and have to travel hours away to go to different ones, which really doesn't make any sense. So we tried to work on that, and then it just seemed like we couldn't come together with like a policy proposal for it, because everything we went to look at, it was like there was some sort of textbook answer to why this was the case, and it was like it was too much for us as a policy paper to try and solve in the time frame. So we looked at it logically, changed our mind again. We were going to do human trafficking, then we were going to do energy across both. So then by maybe week 4, we finally had decided, we were talking one day about female representation in politics. It's a problem on both sides, and we had said that in the south they'd introduced quotas, and Owen actually said to us, well, how are you going to make this a policy proposal talking about quotas? And we said the comparison in the north, that they don't have them yet, should they have them? And then we kind of said we wanted to be a bit different with it. We don't just want to talk about women, you know, they're not the only minority group. Young people aren't represented, ethnic minorities aren't represented, so we then branched off in our separate ways. Even at that we had some conflict over whether we were for quotas or against, and ultimately decided that each group wasn't going to focus on quotas. Some were more on finance, some were on resources, some were on education. It was more relevant to each minority group, and we worked from there.
What about
Back in UCD, David Morrow basically came up with the idea of taking sport. And I think it was mainly talking about sport within Northern Ireland because it is so divided, but we had the idea that we could move into the south as well. We realised when we actually sat down to do this that you can talk a lot about sport, it is very divided, especially in the north, but is there anything you can actually do about it? It's very deep set, it's very deeply rooted, the issues in Northern Ireland. To actually change that is very technical, and it would take a very long time, and you simply couldn't agree, especially in our group, on anything like that. As Stephen well knows, he's probably a bit more grey than he started the programme. So we moved on to maybe something more practical. What can we actually propose? What could we change in this space of time? You know, something very practical that we could look at, and that's where we came up with this idea. We realised how much money was being pumped into sporting bodies in the north. A huge amount of money from all these different sources. It's scattered about a huge amount of places, EU, the British government, the Irish government, America. It's all coming in, and community groups have really good intentions, they always do. So they say they want to stop sectarianism, they say they want peace in Northern Ireland, these huge issues that they want to conquer, and it's simply, you know, just too big for them to take on. But they do have good intentions, but they don't know how to go about it. It's not monitored correctly, you don't know if it's actually changing anything. So we decided, you know what, let's put in place something to help them. Let's put in place a marker that could actually say they are doing the right thing. They're taking realistic goals. They're using the right measures to actually achieve those goals. So that's what we wanted to do, something very practical to put in place, that when people give money to these projects, they know where it's going, they know how it's spent, and they know if it's effective or not. And I think that's what we landed on, so it's quite acceptable.
Well, we'll just say a couple of words as well. Thank you for your question, Stephen. It's a very good question. And I think that all the groups here represented today can say there was a little bit of organisational issue in each group. But from the outset, our group felt that we needed to have a very focused topic, because it was very easy to go off topic and start talking about things that weren't really relevant. So at the first meeting of our group, we actually brainstormed or blue skied all the issues that we would think would affect mental health in third level education. And then from that huge list, an expansive list, we then picked out 4 or 5 different issues that we felt were the most prominent and the biggest issues that would affect young people in their transition to third level education. And then we delegated out roles to the group to focus on these key issues so that it remained focused and that people were not sort of getting off topic and taking the real sort of punch out of our policy paper. So that's how we focused on it.
And I think there was a lot of luck in our team. We just seemed to get along about everything, and it really speeded up the process. That was something that we all kind of amalgamated experience that we've had and said, this is big with all of us. So all of us are really on the same page from the very beginning. And we stepped off that page, approaching, what did you box probably? And it was always something that was making sure, we always had regulators that were making sure that we're always staying to the topic that we're doing, we're very focused. Because we knew we only had 8 weeks there, so really helped.
how much did Brown pay you to say that, right? Any more questions? David.
If WIP do the WIP papers again next year, what one thing should they change about the way we do it?
Right, one thing I think is that whenever we're at orientation, a bit more time should be put into what you're doing about your topic and maybe start brainstorming ideas about what you're going to write about, because we did have a vague idea but we didn't really come back to it. We were told to do a bit of reading but we hadn't really technically thought of what are we trying to change, what's going to be the policy paper about, what's the problem, what's the solution. We just had a vague idea of a problem. So I think if we tried to brainstorm about solutions, you would realise any obstacles we were going to come across and be able to tackle them together. You know, we all spoke on Facebook every day before we came here. We would have been able to coordinate together, and we made a policy paper group in the 3rd week, I think it was, of being here, so just maybe encourage more communication within the teams before you come to save time, because unfortunately we wasted a bit of, well, not wasted, but lost a bit of time at the start.
And I kind of on that as well, so say in our group, our original topic when we decided in Dublin was sport and identity. That was what we decided on. And I think I had a certain view of what that meant and what we could what road we could go down. but then we actually, maybe everyone else kind of had different ideas, but we didn't express them until we got here. And they were around the table, and people had completely different understandings what was meant by sport and identity. For me, it was very much how sport was tied up with identity. As it was said during our presentation, the GAA is mainly a Catholic organisation up north, while maybe rugby or the Northern Irish soccer team is linked to Protestant community. I thought that was very interesting how we could break down those kind of barriers. Other people said, no, I thought it was to do with like health, you know, how it maybe sport affects your identity through health, and just completely different points. So I thought, I think more time, maybe at the beginning, kind of actually discussing what not only the topic is, but the kind of the essence of it, and so we're all on the same page getting here.
I would like to see maybe a tutorial about how you actually develop policy papers. Because we're going into this with absolutely no idea how you actually go about setting out a policy paper. Whether that's someone from the government coming in to say, these are the steps we usually take, this is how long it usually takes, these are the people you need to have, these are the sections you should have. Maybe just a quick tutorial on orientation to say, you know, these are the basic steps, this is how we do it in government, this is how we lay out policy. Maybe you can take that into this, so that we have kind of a framework to work off from the get-go.
I'd like to ask, maybe, what was the most positive thing that you guys experienced from the paper?
I think dealing with differences, or different views. It was you know, we've all done group projects at university, but it's not really as heated, and you don't have a short time frame, and you know, 1 hour on a Tuesday night, and you were arguing over whether you believed that there were enough women in the government or not. I think it was interesting then leaving that and still having a friendship with the people you had, but being able to have an intellectual debate with them in the room.
I think for our group it was probably learning how to manage our time and resources, and also communicating, because we had 1 hour or a couple of hours a week to all join together and plan our WIP papers, so we really relied on emailing, texting, making sure people were doing their job, making sure things and deadlines were being met. So the focus had to be maintained at all times. So I think communication was a big thing. And then as far as time management goes, we had a very short space of time to do it, so we really had to be very tight in how we managed our time, getting things done and making sure we were meeting our deadlines.
I think the fact it was something that I know I was very passionate about, and a lot of people there were clearly very passionate about. But the biggest thing about this was that we had a scheme that like genuinely seen being implemented, and that was huge to me, that we could actually start something here that could have a knock-on effect and really make a change. It was very tangible change that you can see yourself making, and it really pushes you when you only have like that half an hour left, people are going off topic, to push in, lads, come on, get the energy up. We only have a few weeks to do it.
I think for us, I think for me anyway, in our group, was the teamwork, because as Rachel said already, a lot of us used to do this kind of essays, group essays in university, but what was good about our group, and then maybe some people don't really pull their weight or whatever, but in our group, I think once we had an idea and a pathway, everyone pulled their weight, everyone contributed in their own different ways how they best do that. So I think that was positive for me anyway.
Thanks, guys. So we have time for one more question.
What is the next step for your policy papers?
So, what is the next step for your policy paper, guys?
So when we go back home, we present the policy papers back home. We say how it will make a change, how we think it makes a change. We try and to the t-shirt.
We present the policy papers, and we so obviously our one very much sport focus, so we'll be in DCAL, which is basically the department that runs sport in Northern Ireland. So we'll be presenting that to them, because it will be really much our ideas top down. So it'll start at the top, so we'll be trying to get it into their hands so they can really definitely understand it.
Our team set up like a PR team. It's myself and Robbie. Or not Robbie, sorry. Robbie, sure. So we tried to look at the students in our groups that are involved in political parties at home, because our paper is essentially about trying to change the way political parties operate. They're the monopoly of what we're trying to achieve. And we're basically just going to be like lobbyists when we get home, just trying to get as many people as we can to read the paper, tell them that in a lot of cases it's a lack of interest, people aren't being asked to run, they aren't being given the right resources, and trying to make the parties themselves see that and change the status quo.